So what we're going to talk about today is menus and how to kind of manipulate them and change them to do what you want them to do. Muse is very good with them as far as a just kind of like the simple stuff. The more complicated stuff could get a little bit harder, but you know, for the most part, you want a menu to be relatively simple. You don't want it to stand out too much. You don't want it to take over the design. You know, I mean, you want your logo to stand out. You want your product to stand out. Your menu should be easy to find, and it should be easy to use, but it shouldn't be so fancy that it's like the centerpiece of the entire website. You know what I mean? Like it just, you want it organized, you want it simple, you want it there so people know where it's going to be, and then done. You know what I mean? So that's really what we're going to do. So anyway, how you get a menu, in case you haven't figured that out, let me just delete this. You go over to the widgets library and you have your choice of horizontal or vertical. 99.9% of the time you're going to want a horizontal menu. They've done studies on which of the two is better, and horizontal menus are noticed better. They are used more often. They generate better traffic on your website. Vertical menus are generally saved for websites that have incredibly large amounts of content. Say, for instance, Amazon. Okay? Amazon has a vertical menu along the side that helps you drill down your categories to narrow down your search parameters. But they still have a horizontal menu. That's their main menu. And then the vertical menu allows you to kind of like get more specific. So horizontals are basically always going to be the best. You're going to drag them in here. And the cool thing about the horizontal menu is that right away it's going to automatically populate the menu with whatever pages you have out here on the thing. So that's really very cool. One of the things that's important is to decide where you want to put your menu, if you want to put it on the master or the pages. If you put it on the master, it's nice and easy because no matter what you do, it's always going to be consistent amongst all the pages that have that master. The problem with putting it on the master sometimes is that when you're scrolling your pages, if you have stuff on the page, whatever is actually on the page is above what's on the master. So the master, so if you scroll up, any boxes that are on your page will actually go over top your menu. Now, if your menu scrolls up along with everything else, then it doesn't matter. But if you want your menu pinned to the top and always staying still, then you might want to paste it into the page. And it's actually really easy to do. You just copy, and then you edit, paste in place, and then you can actually put it on every page really easily. I'm building it in the master for now, but again, it's really easy to move it just by edit, copy, and then edit, paste in place if you need to. The first thing you'll notice when you select on a menu is you have this little blue circle with the triangle here, and you can click on that, and that's going to give you a whole bunch of options. Just going to go through them from the top. First is top-level pages. So right now, the way this menu is set, it's only going to show the top-level pages. So if I go back to my organizational view, I've got a whole bunch of pages that are underneath these pages, right? It's only going to show me these top-level pages the way it's set now, none of the others. However, if I go and I click on this again, I can change that to go to all pages. Now it takes a second, but now it's going to populate the menu with a series of drop-downs based upon all the secondary pages that I have. Now when you do this, it looks really complicated at first. And the reason why it does that is because it just lays them all out there on top of each other. But that's not how it's going to look when you preview. So I'm going to save this and then preview. And you'll notice that they're not there, but when I hover over top of them, menu, then the submenus will show up. See? Okay? And we can control how these look, and I'm going to show you how that happens in a little bit. But just important to understand that when you first do that, it is going to look a little complicated because it just kind of blasts them all out there. Let's turn those off for, well, actually you don't need to turn them off. Here's how you get it to look a little bit better. when you click on a menu, the first time you click on it, it clicks on the whole menu. Then after you click that first time, you can click a second time, and now it's going to click on an individual menu. And when I click the second time on the individual menu, which is the third click overall, you'll notice that my drop downs disappear. And then after that, every time I click on that individual button, my drop downs will show up. And it does the same thing for the submenu, so I can click on the individual buttons, and now my drop menus will disappear. So that's how you can kind of control what you're seeing in the preview and what's not. It's a little disorienting, in my opinion, that they all kind of come out at once and just like lay out there on top of each other. But at the same time, it's good because now you know that it's actually doing what you wanted it to do. So, you know, I guess 6 of one, half dozen the other, as long as you know how to control it. Now, let's go back to our little menu here. The direction is horizontal. You can change it to vertical here too. So, you know, if you accidentally drag the wrong one out from your widgets library, if you accidentally drag out a vertical instead of a horizontal or vice versa, you can change that in the little blue, with the little blue circle. You can change that in this contextual menu right here. The next button is really important. This is the Edit Together button. You almost always want this checked on. And what that means is as I start to edit a certain one of these individual buttons, it will make all of them do the same thing. We're going to explore this a little further in about 2 minutes from now or less, but I want you to understand that should almost always be checked on. If that is turned off, what it would allow you to do is individually edit the color of a button or other things, and it won't affect all the others. Whereas with this checked on, when you change one thing about one menu item, then all the other menu items will actually do the same thing. Like I said, 99% of the time, you want that checked on. And it says item size. You can do uniform size, uniform spacing. Doesn't matter. You can play with that, but that basically just changes whether the spacing or the size of the button is the same. Uniform size is really what you want most of the time, again, because you want each menu item to be the same size, regardless of the length of the words inside and everything like that. Okay, parts. So here we can choose a left icon, which looks a little weird, or we can have a show label. So here it's got a right icon for the submenu. So you see how it's got these little triangles, these little arrows that are next to my menu item. And if I build the preview here, you can see them a little bit better when they show up. You've got these little arrows, and then when I roll over this and I go down, you see it's got a right arrow. So it's saying, okay, below this is a submenu, and now this one's saying, okay, this is going to pop up to the right. You see how that works? You can turn those off because they're really not there. They're just telling people that there's more to come underneath. And sometimes you like that and sometimes you don't. So a lot of times show right icon, we can turn that off. So now there's going to be no arrows. So save, re-preview. And it still does the drop downs just the way that it normally would. It's just now there's no visual indicator for people that there's now a submenu under that. I don't think that really matters. The danger in that, though, is if people aren't expecting a submenu, they could go here and click on the button before the menu actually pops up. I don't know if that's ever happened to you on a website. It's happened to me before where I didn't know there was a rollover. I didn't know there was a drop down. So I went, click, and then it like, oh wait, I could have gone directly by waiting for the drop down, but I didn't because I didn't know it was there. So it could be a little annoying. Whatever. I mean, it depends. You play with both, see what you like. Again, each one's going to be individual. I'm going to keep it off. And then here we have positioning. The parts are positioned. So I can say horizontally, center aligned, top aligned. So you can see how they pushed everything up to the top. You can go vertically center aligned. Well, see, this is not a vertical menu, so those aren't showing at all. 99.9% of the time, you want vertical center aligned. Okay? So it's right in the middle of the box. Now, you can also push the text over to the left or the right of the box with the text alignment tool, which I'll show you in just a second. This is just kind of showing you where the text is going to be along this route here. Okay? So now, that's basically all the options here. Let's take a look at some of the ways that you can change individual buttons. So once you've kind of set your options for the overall look of your menu, one of the other things to kind of take in mind before we go into the individual buttons actually is pinning and spacing. So right now I've dragged this in and it's pinned. You notice it's pinned to the page and it's kind of to the left, and so if I build this, you'll notice that as I scroll, see my menu goes up with the pages. That may not be what I want. I may not want it to do that, because you'll notice that I have the bar getting darker here, kind of indicates to me that the menu should stay where it is. So you can pin a menu bar just like any other item in Muse. So what I'll do is I'll pin it to the browser instead of the page, and now when I do my preview, you can see that the menu is staying the same. Okay, so that looks a lot better. It's too low inside the bar here, so I'd have to adjust the height, but at the same time you can see how that looks a lot better, and then as I scroll my web page, that's going to always stay at the top. So that's a good thing. You can also have your width change. So if I go up to resize, right now it's not resizing at all. I can change it to responsive. I can also make my menu bar stretch to browser width all the time. There's a lot of different things that you can do. You know, usually responsive is pretty good, or fixed. Sometimes you want a menu bar that stretches all the way across, but the problem with that is then your items, if you get a really widescreen browser, your menu items are separated by a huge amount of space. Let's just show that. So right now this is responsive. Let me preview that. So now if I go ahead and I readjust, you can see how they are changing, actually not so much. But if I take this and I go to stretch to browser width, let's just put it down here so it's part of the thing. Now what you're going to notice is you can see how there's large amounts of space in between the menu items, and it may not look very good. So let's preview this again. Oh, it's not working for some reason. That's interesting. Let's just take my top level pages only. Maybe at the bottom level pages were messing things up for me. Kind of weird. Still not working. Oh, maybe it has to do with my pinning. I pinned it. I need to pin it to the center. Let's see if that makes a difference. I think maybe it was dealing with, that shouldn't have. No, still not quite working. But you can see how it would have a large amount of space between the text. Anyway, okay? That might not look good. Here's a workaround. Put a rectangle object underneath the menu bar that gives you your color, and then just center your menu bar or push it off to the right and have it be smaller, and then you can kind of control the width of the menu bar, but then you can have that color of the menu bar go all the way across without having to worry about it. I'm not going to worry about it now. Let's just go back to responsive width and change it here, and then we'll move it back up here like this. Okay, so now how do we start changing the colors of the buttons? Well, that's actually really easy. We're going to click on the menu first, then we're going to click on an individual button. Then over here there's a menu called States. If it's not showing up, you go to the Window menu and you click on States, and now you're going to have a series of colors. And these colors correspond with what the mouse is doing on the menu bar at that time. So normal means that the mouse is not interacting with the menu item at all. Rollover means that the mouse is hovering over that menu item. Mouse down means that it's been clicked. And then active means you are now on that page in particular. So just to illustrate how this all works, I'm going to make these really garish colors, and we'll go into this a little bit, and then we'll change it back to something more subtle. So we'll keep the normal as this. I'm going to make this normal a little bit of a darker gray, but we'll keep it gray. So I'm going to click here, and let's just say about 100, 100, 100. So if I add even amounts of all three colors in RGB, that's going to make it a nice even gray. Hit return. Now I've got a dark gray. When I go to the rollover state, you'll notice that it gets a little lighter. Let's make it blue like my t-shirt here. Okay, that's pretty ugly, but it'll work. And then the mouse down, let's go even uglier and make it green. And then the active will go just as ugly and make it red. So now let me rebuild this. Now here's the interesting thing, guys. If I click on my next menu button, you'll notice that it has all the same states. This is where that edit together thing really comes into play. When you click on the menu, okay, and you have edit together checked, you can change the way the menu responds very easily just by editing only one menu item, and then they all will do the same thing. So now I'm going to preview, and you can see there's my rollover. That looks pretty good. And then if I click, you notice it went red or blue for a second, or actually went green. And now we're on the home page, and look what's happening. That menu item is red, telling me that I am on the home page right now. That's the active. So just to reiterate this, when you've got button states, you have 4 basic states. Normal means that the mouse is not interacting with the menu item at all. Rollover means that the mouse is hovering, not clicking, but just resting on the menu item, the mouse cursor, okay? Then mouse down means you've clicked. And that only shows up for a brief instant. So honestly, I don't always spend a lot of time on that. I usually just keep it the same color as everything else. And then active is the state that the button will be in when you are on that page, to kind of let you know that you are there. It's a nice navigational tool. And as I said at the beginning of this, you know, your menu shouldn't be garish. It shouldn't call too much attention to itself. It should be elegant and simple and easy to understand. So one of the things that you should avoid is a ton of garish colors. The most important thing here is my text readable? Now in this case, it is. And all 4 states you can read the text. If I wanted to, though, I could change the color of the text for an individual state as well. So I just go over here to the, click on the text box itself, and then I can change the text color with the text tool, and I can make my text black for that rollover. Now, this looks really bad. This is a good example of what not to do, because now the text is less readable. Okay, and you really can't read it at all if that's what you're doing. But let's say, for instance, let's do something a little different. Let's say I wanted my rollover to be white. So I can take my rollover, go back to the selection tool, click on the button, and take my rollover color and make it white. Now in this case, the black text actually will work better because it's now just as readable. You see that? So that's really important to take into consideration, is the ability to read the text on the menu. Now one last little thing to put a bug in your head here, you can also, some of you may have already thought of this, click on the fill here for an individual button. You could actually upload an image to the background of your button. Now I would caution you on doing that for 2 reasons. Number 1, photographs tend to make text really hard to read. So having a photograph as the background of your button may not be the best thing in the world. Right? I mean, that makes sense. But there's things you can do like drop shadows and glow and all that sort of stuff to make text more readable. Number 2, if you do it right now, all 4 of my buttons in the menu would have the same background image. So in order to keep them from having the same photographs, let's say I wanted one photograph for home, another photograph for men's or whatever, I would need to uncheck the Edit Together button right here, and then I could do that. However, if you're going to do that, you want to make sure that everything else is set before you uncheck that button so that you know that your menu looks really good. or else you'll end up being forced to edit buttons individually and trying to match them up in size or color or whatever, and that can be a little bit of a pain. It's not horrible. So I caution you about adding pictures to the background. Lastly, if we also have all of our pages, you'll also realize very quickly, let me just turn these off for a second, you'll realize very quickly that we also have to style the states of each individual submenu. So I can click on this button and I do the states, and now they're different. Then I have to go over here and click on that individual button and do the states. So I'll just show you. So if I click on this one, and I'm in the text there, and I set my rollover color to, say, turquoise, okay? You'll notice that it takes effect for all of these submenu buttons, but not for the submenu button. Do you see? So each set can have its own states, which is actually really nice and very powerful. The other thing that you can do is you can set the size. So I can click off, click back on to the submenu, and then I can space that out so that it will match the size of the button above it. And I have to do that individually as well. But it works. And then when I click, so I click that, turn that off, click this, then go back, click that one, and then I have to adjust the size of these. So you can adjust the size of each subset really nicely. Most of you probably aren't going to go quite this far. You might have one drop down. Honestly, you don't even need drop downs. If you don't want drop downs, you don't need them. A lot of menus today in modern websites don't even have the drop downs. They just have top level pages only. And then on the next page, it will show you icons for your sub-level pages. Whatever works. However the organization works for you, that's what you need to do. That's fine. One last thing. So, when we're clicking on this, one of the things that a lot of people want to get rid of is these gaps between the buttons to make the menu look like a solid bar, like one shape. A couple of people have been rather intelligent and put a bar underneath it that's the same color, but then when you do your rollovers, things change and now you can still see the gap. The way to get rid of that gap is actually very easy. You click on the whole menu, so that's highlighted. You go to Window and Spacing, or it may be over here already, but actually it's turned off by default, so it's not. And then here you're going to see a value called Gutter. Just take that gutter value down to 0, and now the buttons will be together. Or you can do the opposite and pump the gutter up, and now you've got a large amount of spacing between the different items. That's really up to you, but that's where you do that. You'll notice, however, though, you can't control that on individual buttons. So you can click on an individual button and you can adjust the gutter, and it really doesn't do much. You have to be clicked on the whole. See, I'm changing the gutter. It's doing nothing. You have to be clicked on the entire menu in order for this gutter thing to actually adjust the spacing of the images. Okay, so that's how you take care of that. Believe it or not, there's even more that you could do. But basically, here's how, in review, here's what you can do. You can pin it. You can adjust the size, the width of your menu bar. You can turn on subpages, turn off subpages. As long as edit together is checked, as you edit an individual button, it will change all of those buttons in that menu set to be the same so that you've got consistency for your menus. It's actually really powerful. It's really nice. The other thing that people have asked me a little bit about is, okay, how did I get that all caps in my menu? Like some people, mine's all lowercase or whatever. It takes the words for the menu directly from the name that you've named your pages in the organizational view here. So if you want it to be in all caps, then the name of all of your things need to be in all caps. So for instance, look, men's is all caps, but notice here it says men's hoodies. That's not. If I go back, whoops, that's not it. If I go back to my master and I turn on my subpages again, you'll notice that the submenus are now in uppercase and lowercase. It's exactly what you see in the organizational view. So if I were to double click on this and go all caps, men's hoodies, okay? When I go back to my master, you can see that that is now changed in the menu, okay? So that's really important for you to understand too. That's where it gathers the names for your pages, is directly from what you've named them here in the organizational view. Does this all make sense? I mean, it's pretty straightforward and it's really kind of fun to play with, but it can be a little confusing and also a little frustrating. So take some time, play with it. The other thing that's really cool is if you mess it up, honestly, it's really easy to delete it, go back to your widgets library and drag in a new one. And because it automatically populates the menu with your pages that you have in organizational view, there's very little work in redoing what's actually in the menu. You just now redoing what you've done for the colors or some of the setup. So it actually makes it really nice to kind of just say, oh, you know what, I don't understand this anymore, I've screwed it up, delete it, and add and just start all over again. It's actually really simple to do that and you don't lose a ton of work. Does this make sense to everybody? Yeah. All right, ready to go.